Board President Jeff Rose.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Kyle, and thanks, Laura, for putting together this really excellent presentation this afternoon. This is a presentation that I've been looking forward to since we started talking about it months ago. It's fitting and totally on topic for one of the themes that we've been addressing as a bar association this year. Our panelists are exceptional, and I can't thank them enough for their time and their willingness to present to us today. We have the Honorable Gary Jackson, who was appointed to the Denver County Court in January of 2013. Judge Jackson received his undergraduate degree from the University of Colorado in 1967 and graduated from the University of Colorado School of Law in 1970. Judge Jackson was working as a Denver Deputy District Attorney from 1970 to 1974. He then joined the federal ranks as an Assistant U.S. Attorney from 1974 to 1976, and then partnered at the law firm of DeManna, Elkind, Cinciano, and Jackson from 1976 to 1981, following which he was partner in DeManna and Jackson from 1981 to 2013. Also joining us today is Sumi Lee, who is the head of Judicial Diversity Outreach at the State Court Administrator's Office, where she focuses on education and outreach efforts regarding the pathway to the bench, with a specific emphasis on strengthening the bench pipeline that reflects the diversity of our communities. Before taking on this role at the State Court Administrator's Office, she was working as a trust and estate attorney in the private sector. She's a past president of the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of Colorado and a graduate of Cobalt. She got her undergraduate degree from Georgetown and her JD from New York Law School. And we also today have Patricia Jarzobski, who is a plaintiff's attorney for over 25 years. She has been extremely active in the Colorado Women's Bar Association and the mentoring and sponsoring of women lawyers. She is a longtime devotee to advancing women as leaders in the legal community. So welcome, Judge Jackson, Sumi, and Patricia. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate all the time that you've put into preparing for this, and we turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. So I am Judge Gary Jackson, and as you can see, I am presenting from my courtroom. Jeff, thank you for the introduction. It saves me some time, but this is my 50th year as a lawyer and judge in Colorado. And I can say it's an honor to say that I will retire on December 30th. So I have been a judge now for 8 years, and it has been an honor for me to be a judge and to be sort of in the closing chapter of my career. You know, the last time I spoke to your bar association was to celebrate the life of Sonny Flowers. Sonny and I were friends, roommates, colleagues for 54 years. And I thought it was only fitting to have a photograph of Sonny and myself. That photograph goes back to 1980 when Sonny and Pam got married. I was the best man. I think that Pam may be on this webinar, so I appreciate her being here. But Sonny passed away on July 29th of this year. He was the former president of your bar association, and I would consider Sonny to be one of the beloved citizens and lawyers of Boulder, Colorado. So in my putting together this slideshow, I wanted to celebrate Sonny's life. And if we can go to the next slide, this is a slide of Sonny and I just last fall. So it's the two of us at my mountain cabin, which is near Nederland, Colorado, in what is called historic Lincoln Hills. And so Sonny and I have been going to my cabin together ever since we met as freshmen on campus in 1964 in Boulder. So I wanted to just give you a glimpse of Sonny when he was not in his tuxedo and his coat and tie. You know, the other part of my presentation today is we're going to talk about another famous Black lawyer from Boulder, and that's Penfield Tate. And we'll talk about Penfield Tate a little bit later in my presentation. But in my presentation today, what is important to talk about is I had a personal call to action back in October of 2018. In October of 2018, Judge Bill Robbins of the Denver District Court announced his retirement. Bill Robbins, if you have not practiced in front of him, is African American. With his announced retirement in October of 2018, it would have meant that there were 0 Black district court judges in the state of Colorado. That's 0 out of 181 district court judges. A few months later, Karen Ashby, Judge Karen Ashby of the Colorado Court of Appeals, announced her retirement. Judge Ashby is African American, and with the announcement of her retirement, there would have been, and still is now, 0 Black African American Court of Appeals or Supreme Court justices in Colorado. So that's 0 out of 29. From my perspective, in the fall of 2018, with the 2 of them announcing their retirement, and with the prospect of having no Black judges on the highest level of our court system, that this was an embarrassment to our bar associations. And when I say bar association, I'm talking about the Boulder Bar Association and all other specialty bars within the state of Colorado, and an embarrassment to the citizens of our state of Colorado. So it was at that point that I had my own personal call to action. I'm going to ask Kyle to show is slide number 1. If he can show slide number 1, that's slide number 1. Now, what that slide shows is the Black judicial officers in 2019. And that was a photograph that was taken the evening after one of our judicial conference sessions up in Vail. And if you look around that table, you will see that there are 6 people there. In Colorado, we have 356 judicial officers. So as of October of 2019, there were 6 Black judicial officers. Now, of those 6 that you see around the table, 2 of them are magistrates. So that particular photograph, in my mind, speaks 1,000 words regarding what I consider to be the lack of judicial diversity throughout the state of Colorado with respect to not only Black judges, but Latino judges, Asian American judges, and those other diverse judges that we will be talking about as we go through this presentation. When we talk about the lack of diversity, I think it's important for me to go through what is basically retracing the history of our lack of diversity and what I call racial inclusion within the court system. Because I have been practicing law for 50 years, I've had the good fortune of actually knowing and working with each of the vanguards with respect to judges of color that have worked in Colorado. And so that very first judge of color who was appointed was Judge Flanagan in 1957. So Judge James Flanagan was appointed to the Denver County Court in 1957. He would have been the very first judge of any color. He would have been the very first diverse judge. So what that basically means, if I can break it down to you, in 1957, there were no women judges. There were no judges of color. Judge Flanagan was the grandson of an enslaved mother, a slave master. He came to Colorado and went to law school in Colorado. And before he was appointed to be a judge in the Denver County Court, it was reported in the Rocky Mountain News that he had won 12 murder cases in a row as a deputy district attorney in Denver. So when he was appointed, he was no slouch, but he was the first. And so at that time, in 1957, those of you who are baseball fans, that was 10 years after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier for Major League Baseball. So Judge Flanagan broke the color barrier for judges here in Colorado. Judge Flanagan was a family friend of my family. He was not only our first judge, but he was a vanguard in the community. He broke the color line in Denver. And when I talk about breaking the color line, it was the red line in Denver. He was the very first Black family to live on Monaco Parkway, which is a very famous street that's not far from the airport, the old airport that runs north and south through Denver. But he also broke the color line and broke the Jim Crow practices with respect to golf, because he was a golfer and he was the first Black player to play at the Cherry Hills Golf Club. And so Judge Flanagan was notorious in many, many different ways in Denver, Colorado. For me personally, in 1970, I was selected and hired to be a deputy district attorney in Denver. At that time in 1970, I was the only Black deputy district attorney in the state. So there must have been 400 deputy district attorneys throughout the state. I was the only Black deputy district attorney. What thrilled me was as soon as I was sworn in, Judge Flanagan welcomed me into his courtroom, brought me back into chambers, spoke to me about his role as a judge, my role as a deputy district attorney, and congratulated me on being a deputy DA in Denver. The next vanguard that I want to talk about is the Honorable Zita Weinshank. She was Colorado's Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Judge Weinshank was appointed as the first full-time woman judge in 1964 in the Denver County Court. She had graduated magna cum laude from the University of Arizona and cum laude from Harvard Law School. So her graduation was actually 2 years prior to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's graduation from Harvard. If Kyle, you'll show slide number 2. Looking at slide number 2, that is a photograph taken at a Colorado Women's Bar Association gathering honoring Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That particular photograph was taken in 1994. Once again, if you look at that photograph, it speaks 1,000 words, because you look at that group of judges who are the luminaries in our state. If you go around the table, right around that round table were the federal court judges in our state, including Judge Weinshank, who is the judge in the chair on the right-hand side that's wearing the multicolored dress or blouse, but that's Judge Weinshank. But if you look around the rest of the room, you see no Black faces, you see no brown faces, you see no Asian American faces, and that was 1994. So going back to Judge Weinshank and my personal relationship with Judge Weinshank, when I was hired as a deputy district attorney in Denver in 1971, I was assigned to her courtroom. So think about that. Today, would that be considered to be conscious bias? Or is that unconscious bias? And when I say that, the only Black DA in the state gets assigned as a deputy to the only woman judge in the state in 1970. But for me, it was a stroke of luck to be in her courtroom. From her, I learned my trial skills. Under her tutelage, I had the advantage of her superior intellect, her talent, her professionalism. Her standard of fairness and equal justice for all helped shape my own practice as a trial lawyer and later on as a judge. Those of you that know the history of Judge Weinshank, she was elevated to the Denver District Court and later on to the U.S. District Court of Colorado. So she was our first woman federal court judge in Colorado. If we go to the next vanguard in our diversity history in Colorado, that was the Honorable Don Pacheco. He was our first Latino district court judge. He was appointed in 1971 to the Denver District Court. And once again, as a deputy DA, I was fortunate to try cases in his courtroom. So as I've gone through this brief history of the diversity of our judges in Colorado, you know, regretfully, it is short-lived because it is less than 50 years old. And regretfully, it's so few in numbers. And that's the reason why for the last 2 years, I have been working on a almost daily basis on increasing the number of diverse judges throughout the state. If we can now go to slides number 5 and 6, and we're going to do this very quickly. 5 and 6, that's Mayor Penfield Tate. He was the very first Black mayor of Boulder. I had the joy of going to law school with Penfield Tate. I started law school at CU in 1967. Penfield Tate came to the law school in 1968 from Ohio. And if we go to the next slide, you will see a photograph of his two brothers, Al Tate and Richard Tate. So the three Tate brothers came to Colorado in 1968, were admitted to CU Law School, and they were a part of what I consider to be the first real initiative done by CU Law School in terms of increasing the diversity of students going to CU Law School. At that time, and if we go backwards to my first year at CU Law School, there were 3 Black law students in my class, and that was myself, Sonny Flowers, and there was a third individual, Jim Cotton, that was in my class. In that class of 150, there were no Latinos, there were no Asian Americans, and there were only 4 women in that class of 1967. So I just briefly go through that information to give you the history of what I consider to be our judicial diversity, the history of when, at least at CU Law School, there was an effort for the law school to become more diverse. The next subject I'm going to go to very quickly so I can turn over my time to Ms. Jarzobski is I'm going to talk about, I was featured in the Denver Post on July 19th. It was a feature in the Denver Post talking about the lack of judicial diversity here in Colorado. It reported in that article that 40% of the defendants in Colorado are either Black or Latino, and that we have so few Black and Latino judges. But I don't like to talk about just the criminal courtrooms. I like to talk about the fact that we as Black people, we get divorces, we die and go to probate court, we get involved in traffic accidents and have personal injury cases. And in all of those courtrooms throughout Colorado, there's the lack of Black and brown faces. So I'm going to now turn this over to my co-chair of the Coalition on Judicial Diversity so that she can talk about the action plan that we put together, the effort that the coalition has made to address the lack of judicial diversity in the state. So if Patricia, if you'll take the baton.
You bet. Thank you, Judge Jackson. Great remarks. Hello, everybody. I am Patricia Jarzobski. I am a past president of the Colorado Bar Association. I also had the honor of serving as president of the Colorado Women's Bar Association, and I co-chair the CBA CJI, which is the Colorado Judicial Institute Diversity on the Bench Coalition with Judge Jackson. When Judge Jackson launched his call to action, the lack of judicial diversity in Colorado was at an inflection point. Because when judges do not reflect the communities they serve, our citizens develop a mistrust in the justice system's capacity to be just and fair to everyone. And public confidence in our judicial branch and the important checks and balances that our judicial branch serves in our democracy erodes. And as Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan said last year when she was visiting and speaking at CU, having a balanced, diverse court makes the decisions of the court legitimate. It's also hard to achieve what you cannot see. And if you're a lawyer of color, if you're a disabled attorney, if you're an LGBTQ attorney, and you do not see diverse judges on the bench, it's easy to believe that that position is not attainable to you and that it is not open to you. And as lawyers and leaders of our bar associations, we shape the norms of our profession. Bar associations are critical vehicles for advancing equity, diversity, and inclusivity. And when bar associations prioritize EDI, it institutionalizes those critical values. And when bar associations do not prioritize diversity and inclusivity and equity, it creates an environment that tends to exclude underrepresented groups. And we as lawyers and bar leaders are a part of the justice system, and it is our responsibility to lead this change. This is our time. So the CBA and the CJI have teamed up to lead a movement that we hope comprehensively addresses the lack of diversity in our state courts. So the coalition's goals are to harness the power of our broader community to implement systemic change that survives and thrives beyond all of us. So we are focusing on changing systems, because one of the things we learned in researching why diversity programs sometimes fail and fizzle, and it's research that really resonated with us, is that mitigating bias is one of the hardest things in human existence. And that any strategy that essentially relies on people to not be biased is doomed to fail. Because eliminating bias requires people to be completely self-aware. And I say this with love, but lawyers are probably not the most self-aware group all the time. So this is one of the reasons why we are focused on changing systems, knowing that hearts and minds will come along the way. So my role today is to quickly update you on the nuts and bolts of the coalition's work. So bear with me while I share my screen. Judge Jackson, give me a thumbs up if you can see that screen share. Okay, here we go. So here is the structure of the coalition. We have hand-selected a group of what we call super volunteers, from diversity bar presidents to law schools to the Attorney General's office, big law firms, small law firms, judges around the state, to create a 19-member coordinating council. Each of the coordinating council members had to have the following qualities to be invited. They are respected within the diversity community here in Colorado. They have a track record of getting things done within a coalition. They are skilled at bringing people together. They can work with the CBA and CJI, and they are willing and able. And you can see from the list of our leaders, they're just a outstanding group of committed people. Folks like Judge Karen Steinhauser, Liz Krupa, Fernando Guzman from CU, Miko Brown, Judge Jonathan Seamus, Phyllis Wan, David Powell, President of the CBA, Jessica Brown, past President of the Hispanic Bar, Christina Hernandez, Ryan Payton, the director of CAMP, past president of the LGBTQ bar. Judge Jackson, John Baker, past president of DBA. Peter Kiklanis, past president of CTLA. Sumi Lee, who you're about to hear from, but she is also the past president of APABA. We've got Judge Kathleen Hearn-Croshaw, John Rodman, Josh Anderson, just a great group of people that is helping to lead our coalition. So the coalition wanted to ensure that our work is action-oriented. It's not just aspirational or a plan that looks pretty on paper that we just talk about. So the Coordinating Council has been meeting for the past year and designing an action plan, which is our roadmap forward. It's a plan that is results and oriented driven, and Kyle is going to send you all a long version of this plan that is it is about 32 pages long that you'll get. I'm going to go through just the highlights of it with you. So we are focusing on 5 main areas. The first area is candidates. And I'm going to let you pause on this slide for a minute so you can see our primary goals with candidates. So we are going to fine tune and improve how our community supports and recruits candidates. We're focusing on how to better train the trainers. And how can we get in front of grade schools and junior high and high school students, not just law students, but really start at the beginning of kids' education and start talking about how important it is to become a judge and the importance of our judicial system. Our second focus is on nominating commissions. This is one of our key goals, is really supporting the judicial nominating commissions in a new way, educating the judicial nominating commissions on why it's important that our bench reflects the communities in which they serve. How can we help educate them better? How can we give them tools to really understand and tools to help them address some biases that maybe are in their system? How can we give them those tools? And also to build a pipeline of applicants for the JNC openings. Our third goal is focused on deciding officials. That includes everybody in the chain, from the governor's office to chief judges to the head of board and commissions and everybody in between, right? Our fourth goal is on accountability and tracking, using data to help bust some of the myths of what are the problems we need to solve, really understanding who's applying for judgeships and who's not. You should also see very quickly a website that will be on the Colorado Bar Association webpage for the coalition. And I know Sumi Lee is working on a website for the branch. It's been difficult to get the data of the demographics of our judges in our state. And Sumi Lee has done a fantastic job of compiling that and making it easily accessible and available to all of us. Fifth goal is on messaging and promoting. How can we get the word out? Using social media, connecting with our local bars and other coalition partners. So that is a quick snapshot of the action plan. And the coalition is now in the implementation phase of our work. So all of the coordinating council members have broken out into 7 teams, and they are holding their first team meetings last month and this month. I know this slide is hard to see, but this is a list of all of the community-wide volunteers, judges, lawyers, past presidents of diversity bars, CBA and DBA past presidents who are serving on our teams and helping us implement our action plan. So our work is coalition driven. It's a movement really of the broader community. And our work is not meant to usurp the work of individual partners, the diversity bars. Our goal really is to design a plan where we all work together in new ways, sharing ideas, coming up with new approaches, building a coordinated coalition to tackle these systemic changes. So in addition to the Coordinating Council and the team members you just saw, we've also recruited what we call coalition partners. So it's entities around our state that are also working with the coalition to help us implement the plan. The Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, the Chief Judges Council, the District and County Court Judges Council, all of the diversity bars are engaged and they're a part of our coalition partners. The Association of Black Women Judges, the Public Defender's Office, the Attorney General's Office, the Young Lawyers Division, IELTS at the University of Denver, the American Board of Trial Advocates, the Faculty of Federal Advocates and CLI, and there's many others. So between the Coordinating Council, the team members and the coalition partners, there are 60 community leaders representing over 27 community organizations who are working together to help implement this action plan. So we have told our team members that we hope to see kind of the first phase of their work, not all of the work, there's a lot of work to be done, but the first phase of their work, we'd like to see that rolling and in place by July. So we are trying to move fast. So let me pause for a minute before I wrap. Do you have any questions about the coalition or the structure or the action plan? Feel free to unmute and ask me any questions. Or we can wait to the end.
So I had a question I put in the chat. I wondered, have you identified the likely barriers to entry?
We have, and those barriers from our perspective are reflected in the plan, right? So we spent a lot of time answering that question. What are the barriers? And then devising the plan around what we thought those barriers were.
And have you talked to the candidate pool to see what they think the barriers are? And my frame of reference here is I came to Colorado with Westinghouse Nuclear, and we got tagged by the EEOC for what they thought was a bias in hiring nuclear engineers. And we had a lot of data on it. We collected data. Unfortunately, in the late 1990s, nobody wanted to be a nuclear engineer, including young Black engineers coming out of the colleges. It just wasn't the growing field. It was a dying field. We implemented a corrective action plan, but again, you were fighting kind of trying to swim upstream against a trend that was external to us. So I wonder, what kind of barriers do you see in that kind of regard that may be unintentional barriers or may be below the surface?
That is a question for, that would take some time for me, Charles, to answer.
Okay.
But we are fully aware and are paying attention to some of those implicit biases, right? And you'll see some of that focus in the work that we'll be doing with the judicial nominating commissions. Is we all have them. And how can we address that? How can we recognize that? What can we do in the process to make it more objective, from what the application to the questions to the interview and to how you're evaluating candidates. So, looking at those unconscious biases or implicit biases will be a part of what we do.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. I know some of you might have more to say on that also. So let me wrap with this. When you think about those pivotal points of historic change in our country, lawyers are always there. We're in the forefront, we're in the background, we're forging the path forward. So I want to thank Judge Jackson, who some of you may know, he retires. He retires in just a few weeks. And so I want to thank Judge Jackson for reminding us and for inspiring us that as lawyers and judges and bar leaders, it is our responsibility to ensure that our justice system is fair and equitable and diverse and inclusive. And I want to thank Sumi Lee, who I'm going to pass the baton to, for taking on this hard work and spearheading it within the branch. That is not easy to do, to move the judicial branch of state of Colorado. So thank all of you as members of the Boulder Bar, and for your leadership, for listening, and for taking action. Sumi, Zoom floor is yours.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you, Judge Jackson. I'm going to share my slide here in a bit as well. But thank you so much for having me here today. And can everyone see my slide okay? Great, thank you so much. So as Patty and Judge Jackson mentioned, my name is Sumi Lee, and I serve as the head of Judicial Diversity Outreach for the Colorado Judicial Department. I am very excited to share a little bit about my work since I started in February of this year, which is an interesting time to start any positions, and certainly one that is brand new. But my position was created by the Colorado legislature last year to focus on outreach and education regarding judicial vacancies and the judicial application process. And as mentioned, my focus specifically is to create a state court bench that reflects the communities that the judges serve. And as far as we know, we are the first state in the country to have a position of this kind within the judicial department. And this is due to the work of Judge Jackson and Patty and other leaders in our community that are dedicated to this cause that really created the momentum and started the conversation with our legislators to create this position. So for that, I'm very grateful. And so as Patty mentioned, judicial diversity is crucial for a fair and impartial system of justice. And so in creating this role, the department certainly is dedicated to improving that diversity all across the state. And Charles actually asked a question earlier about barriers to entry. So I want to talk about that a little bit. When we actually look at the pathway on how somebody becomes a judge, there's a portion of my work that is a little bit what I call short-term focused, which is how do I create more opportunities and resources for attorneys who are ready to apply to become judges, right? So I would say barriers for applicants are, things like I hear a lot, some lawyers who are applying for the first time don't really know how to get started. So, how do they actually get started in the process? Who do they talk to? How do they get the resources they need? I also hear particularly from women and diverse applicants that there's a tremendous amount of imposter syndrome that tends to come up. And I think, that makes them think, well, should I apply for this or not? And some applicants have even shared with me that they filled out an application, but that it sat in the drawer for 5 years before they actually had the courage to pull that out and hand it in. And so I think some of those are, certainly ones that I want to address through conversation and just making those resources available just by realizing, they're not the only ones that are going through or having questions about that. And so that's kind of what I think about what the barriers are for attorneys. But when we think about what barriers might exist for a student to go through college and to go to law school and then to become an attorney, we're really talking about the longer term pipeline building work that is also involved in my job. So in my job, I'm doing both of the short term kind of resources and also the longer term pipeline building. So what are some of those barriers for students that are wanting to enter the legal profession? I mean, there's so many barriers that really exist. And, I'm just going to highlight a couple of them that I have heard from conversations, but everything from, I think, access to higher education and to be able to afford college and to go to law school. And then once you're in law school, I think making career choices sometimes based on having to pay for student loan debt rather than maybe what you're interested in practicing. Those things don't always line up. And then I think there's also issues of having right access to mentors and sponsors along the way in your building your career. And then having access to a network of people of influence and again, mentors that can support and encourage you to become a judge. So there's a number of, I think, barriers that exist. And even actually, because my work is also statewide and not just in the metro area, I think some of these issues also multiply when you go into rural communities. If you think about it, we only have, 2 law schools in the entire state, both of which are located in the Denver metro area. So I actually spoke with someone recently who is from the Four Corners region, and she told me that she was interested in going to law school, but that she didn't, the realities of her moving to Denver or Boulder or New Mexico to attend law school was just not a reality and not something that she thought that she could afford. And so we think about access to law school education from that standpoint as well. So Charles, I hope I answered some of the questions that you brought up, but these are just some of the few that I have heard.
Yeah, I think so. My daughter considered CU 7 years ago when she graduated from CU, and she decided for different reasons, but I was shocked at the tuition when I saw it. And so certainly financial's that. I used the GI Bill. I took 4 years enlisted in the Air Force and used it to get my bachelor's degree, my law degree, and pass the bar. So it's not a small thing. And one thing I suggest you might look at is, I just looked to see if it's there. I knew a number of JAGs, Army JAGs. I went to the JAG Corps after graduation that did the funded legal education program. They came out essentially owing nothing, and they got some stipend while they were in law school so they could live on. And then the final thing, just looking at it, I know a number of successful Black lawyers and a couple of young ones who are hoping to be. And that's why I asked kind of maybe about hidden things that you don't think about. Probably when they want to pay off those loans, the real go-getters, they want to be in private practice with one of the big firms or form their own practice. And they haven't really considered what it would be like to be a judge. And that's going to take some convincing.
Yeah, and I think, one of those hidden barriers that I've seen this year is actually was as a result of some of the elimination of law clerk positions, unfortunately, around the state. For example, the San Luis Valley shares one law clerk between all the judges that are in that district. And because of the budget cuts, because of the pandemic, that position was eliminated. Well, for a young attorney that is trying to start a practice or to start a legal career in the San Luis Valley, being a law clerk is actually one of the most stable and well-paying positions as a young attorney. So when you think about elimination of positions like that, it's not just how it impacts a judge or judicial department, but how that affects the pipeline also. And so these are some of the things that I want to make sure that the judicial department continues to think about when we think about staffing and providing opportunities to students.
Yeah,
but,
look, and I thought there's funny things. I had no lawyers in my family. My dad was an engineer. So in terms of a frame of reference or how to get started, I had nothing. I was just, it was a total roll of the dice. If you had a clerkship or an internship that would allow you to kind of bridge that gap and become the first in your family, that makes a big difference. And part of going to the JAG Corps was that I knew the military, and I figured I could gain those skills there and then decide what I wanted to do next. But I knew nobody in the town. I was from out of state, so I really had no connections whatsoever. And I'm thinking about a lot of Black students who might be, or minority students who might be candidates. That's got to be a big mental barrier to taking that step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the kind of call to action, I think for this organizations and the members of, just attorneys that are practicing in Boulder is that, more, of a relationship that the local attorneys can have with certainly the CU Law, which is the local law school students, to try to mentor and to establish that relationship to guide some of these students that are entering law school for the first time, I think would be a tremendous resource and something that, again, I think will have an impact beyond just that first year experience or even the law school experience, but will I think, plant the seed to create successful lawyers down the road. So Patty mentioned a little bit about our focus on data. And so I just want to talk a little bit before I share the data statewide about why data really is an important part of my work. When I took this position, I took a little bit of time to look on our judicial website, what type of data was available about our judges and about diversity. And I really could not find a lot on that beyond just my manually computing some of those numbers. And so part of the work that I want to do is to understand the problem that we are trying to solve, and to provide metrics on, how are we doing, what is the progress that we are making, so that everyone has opportunity to learn the data about our own district in which we practice or go to school in. So, that is why I'm focusing on data as a big part of my work at Judicial. So I just want to share with you, this is what the judicial diversity data looks like statewide. So, and I just want to point out that while I am sharing data about race and ethnicity and about gender, obviously when we talk about diversity, we are talking beyond just those categories. But this is the information that is available to us right now, and I am looking to broaden those, the data that we collect, to make sure that we are also collecting data down the road about different aspects of diversity, and in terms of practice areas, disability status, LGBTQ, and other considerations beyond just race and gender. So when we take a look here, on the left-hand column, you'll see the makeup of the Colorado population as a whole. And in the third column, you see what the Colorado State Court bench looks like as of October 31st, 2020. This number does include Denver County Court judges, but this does not include magistrates or water referees. And what you can see from this is that we have an underrepresentation of every category of race and ethnic groups. And for particular, for groups like the Hispanic and Latino community, you see that the deficit is in the double digits. I was reading a study through the Latino Leadership Institute that said that 1 in 4 Coloradans will be Latino by the end of the decade. And so when you couple data like this with where Colorado is going in terms of its population, you really start to see the need in doing this work, certainly. And for example, when we point out up at the top that, only 0.3% of judges are American Indian and Alaska Native, we're actually talking about one judge out of 356, right? So even though that percentage might not seem like much of a deficit, when you think about, we have one judge in the entire state that represents that community. Again, I think the numbers and the statistics can really portray the need that we have for greater diversity. Now, when we go to gender, we see that the Colorado population is about 50-50 in gender breakdown, and that we're about at 58 and 42% on the bench as of October. I looked at the district data by judicial district, and I saw that only about 6 out of the 26 judicial districts in the state have 50% or more women on the bench. And so, again, I think this is an area that we've actually made great strides in the past year, but something that we can continue to improve upon. I also pulled data that is specific to Boulder. So this is what the Boulder County looks like as of at the end of October again. And I will actually say that this is, the 20th is one of the few districts that actually has a pretty good representation of what the population looks like, although there is room for improvement, certainly. So I just wanted to share this data with you. And in showing this, I just, again, want to emphasize what I brought up earlier, which is that even though the numbers might not look as bad or worse than other districts or as a statewide population, there is certainly work that needs to be done that could be done within the district. Again, we see that there are no Black judges serving in Boulder, so no one representing that population on the bench. And again, I think Boulder is in a really unique position as one of the two cities in Colorado with law schools. And I saw that 36% of incoming 1L class for a CU law school identified as a person of color, which is actually a new record for CU law school. But studies have shown that just because you are in law school doesn't mean that you're getting the support you need or you're thriving. So I think making sure that the community is supporting these students and the law school's effort to provide to address issues of equity for these students by making sure that you are, that we are providing the students with the resources they need and for attorneys and judges to serve as mentors and to help students find meaningful opportunities for employment as well. So again, I just wanted to share the data in terms of the race and ethnic breakdown. And this is, again, the data for 20th Judicial District by gender. And I also saw that that 49% of the incoming class of CU Law School are women. So again, I think there's need for greater mentoring and providing opportunities for students right here in Boulder. So in doing my work, these are some of the focus areas that I have for the next year. Again, I'm working on both the short-term and the long-term pipeline. But one of the first things that I'm focusing on for next year is doing exactly more community presentations like these. Judge Jackson, Patty, and I have been doing a number of these around the state. And we just want to increase awareness of what this issue is and how you can get involved and start to create change in your own community. And secondly, within judicial, I hope to provide more opportunities for students to get experience working with a judge, either while they're in law school and getting school credit for them, or after law school and working as a law clerk. I think not only does this really provide an excellent legal education to complement what they've been studying, but I think that this goes to what Patty talked about earlier, which is, when you can really see when you can see someone who is a judge and get experience working with them, it provides that confidence that maybe you can be in their position one day too. So I think it starts to plant that seed, and students can really start to see on a day-to-day basis what judges do. And thirdly, as Patty mentioned, I'm looking to launch a section of the judicial website where you can find the data that I shared with you today and other information both for students and for applicants, and make it really easy for anyone, regardless of where they are in the state, to be able to find resources that they need in order to become a judge. And I just want to share with you the good progress that we have been making, and this encompasses the work that I've been doing and also what CBA, CJI Coalition has been doing as well. So the great news is that 68% of judges appointed in the past 12 months are women, and we have seen a 46% increase in number of Black and African American judges on our state court bench in the past 12 years, 12 months. And we have also seen more diverse judges featured in local and national media. The photo that you see on the upper right-hand corner there is from a story that Essence Magazine did on the Black women judges that were recently appointed in Colorado. And it's a great news article if you haven't seen that already. And CPR also recently did an interview between Judge Claudia Jordan and Judge Jill Durancy. That's also a really great listen if you haven't listened to that. And the screenshot on the bottom left is from a 9 news story that featured women judges of the Denver County Court. So again, you know, I'm just so happy to see that, you know, that we're making more aware of what the need is, but also celebrating the successes that we have achieved. And again, I think a big part for me is that I'm not doing this work alone. I can't do it alone. It is going to take the work of the coalition and the coalition's partners and the whole community in order to continue to sustain the efforts that have been made already. So kind of my ask for today, just to wrap up my talk, is that it's never too early to start the conversation if you're thinking about becoming a judge. Either reach out to somebody who has applied recently, or you know, attend one of the many CLE programs that we're starting to offer on this topic. But it's never too early to start the conversation. And, you know, consider serving on a judicial nominating commission or a performance commission to get an insight as to what that process involves. I know that Patty has served on a judicial nominating commission and has spoken on a number of CLEs just about her experience and knowledge from that time. And so, you know, and also help us spread the word to non-attorney leaders in your community who might be, you know, great people who can serve on that. And then just reach out to any of us with your ideas, you know, with any ideas that you have for improving judicial diversity, either here in Boulder or statewide. And then just reach out to us if you'd like to just have a conversation. And as you know, the judicial website already, you know, where the opportunities are posted. But this is just a reminder of where they are on the website. The website will go, will get a little bit of a different look in 2021 that will hopefully make it a little bit easier for you to find these opportunities. And I did include a QR link at the bottom of the screen there, which you can scan with your phone, and you can receive notifications about the vacancies when they are announced. And with that, I just want to leave you with our contact information. You know, again, reach out to us with any questions or thoughts that you have, and thank you again for your time.
Excellent. Well, this is Kyle. Thank you to the presenters. If any of the attendees have any questions or want to pass along some well wishes, looks like good luck in your retirement, Judge Jackson, please free use the chat, or if you do have any questions, I think the presenters have a few minutes to answer those.
And Sumi, I don't want to monopolize, but the financial stuff is kind of astounding. I went to the University of South Carolina. I remember I was on active duty with the Air Force that summer, and I visited Syracuse University, where I was accepted, and was told it was $9,000. Hurry up, make a decision. We got a wait list. And I went to South Carolina. 2 professors took me on a tour, and the tuition out of state was roughly $2,000. I just look at the CU tuition; it's $30,000. And that's well beyond the normal inflation rate. If I was looking at that, I probably would have made a different choice of careers.
And Charles, that's of course one of the barriers, is that the tuition in Colorado is at least $30,000. And so, you know, one of the things that I encourage is those alumni of CU and DU, that when you think about the type of donations or contributions that you could make to your law school, so that there are scholarships available for students to be able to enter law school. I know that when I entered law school, and I realized it's 53 years ago, the tuition at that time was about $250 per semester. So that's a major barrier for students to go to law school right now.
Yeah, so you look at CU, you're coming out owing as much as my first mortgage when I moved here to Colorado. And that, for a young person who doesn't have a working career as a professional, you got to look at that trade-off and say, do I really want to do that?
Well, absolutely. It's something that has to be considered. It's a barrier. It's something that, like I say, alumni of the various universities must recognize that. And when they think about their discretionary money and to help prevent the type of diversity issues that we have, do you make those type of contributions to those funds within law schools that are being directed towards diverse students?
And I do see a question in the chat. Sorry, I couldn't access the chat while I was presenting, but I see a question from Heather about support and for underrepresented judicial officers once they are on the bench. And thank you so much for that question. I think it's a very important point that we are starting to do work on. Justice Marquez chairs the newly formed Committee on Judicial Wellbeing, and that committee will be focusing on this exact topic because I realize that it's not enough for me to do the work to try to bring in diverse judicial officers. I think we have to do better in making sure that they are successful and set up to succeed once they take the bench. So thank you for that question.
You know, the other thing that I'd like to talk about is that the coalition has made certain priorities. And the priorities that we've made have been in terms of the various counties in Colorado that have the greatest number of Black and Latino citizens. So we are focusing on Arapahoe, Denver, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, and Adams. So we basically have a 2-year plan. Of course, this work is going to be ongoing, but in the first 2 years, those are the counties that we're focusing on because we feel that that's where the greatest need is. Pueblo, which has either the 3rd or 4th largest number of Black citizens, has never had a Black judge. And as Sumi has pointed out, here in Boulder, the percent of Black people in Boulder is about 1.6%. Boulder has never had a Black judge. And I look at that sort of ironically that Boulder being the home of CU Law School and the fact that through its history with CU Law School being housed in Boulder, that there's never been a Black judge in Boulder. So these are issues that we want to deal with. These are issues that we want to correct. And we think that making this information known is a part of solving the problem, making it known what the disparities are.
I want to also add, I so appreciate Sumi's comments about short-term and long-term goals. And I think sometimes we forget, we had Governor Hickenlooper who was, we had great luck with, and we were able to communicate with him and his staff. Governor Polis has done a phenomenal job, but it matters who our governor is, you know, and so we've got this window right now. And so we have to act. We have to act.
You know, I'd like to give an anecdote when we talk about we have to act now and we're seeing movement, we're seeing changes. There was an opening in Arapahoe County for a county court position, and this was just about a month ago. The Judicial Nominating Commission in Arapahoe County, to show the change in ideas and the change in terms of what they consider to be important for the county, they interviewed 11 candidates to be the Arapahoe County County Court. Of those 11 candidates that they interviewed, 5 were Latino, 4 were Black, 1 Asian American, 1 white candidate. So that to me is a reflection of people understanding that there is a need for more diverse judges in particular counties. And that is, that demonstrate that Arapahoe County and the Judicial Nominating Commission responded to that need.
And if I could just add one more thing, you know, One thing I've also heard from newly appointed judges is, you know, as to what was one of the most important or helpful things that they have found, or what got them to actually apply for the position. And I heard a lot that it is really the personal outreach from either judges that they've appeared in front of, or partners that they've practiced with, or just other attorneys that they really respect, reaching out to them and saying, have you thought about applying to be on the bench? So I think for everyone on this call, you know, if you yourself you're not interested in applying, or you know, that doesn't also stop you from encouraging other talents that you see, and encouraging other people that you think would be a good judge down the road, to encourage them, because I think that really goes a long way.
It goes a long way. And then we say, and we've got your back. We will help you. We'll support you. What else?
Awesome. That may be it. So we've gone a little bit over. So thank you again to all of our presenters, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. I think we will call that a day. And this presentation will be posted on our YouTube channel if you have to revisit any point. But again, thank you to Judge Jackson, Sumi, and Patricia. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.